can't sleep at night. All I hear are the footsteps and the moans.
Zachary Busher's voice had a slight wheeze to it. He was an old soul with a warped shape that made him resemble Jabba the Hutt. Judging by the dusty pictures I saw around his cluttered old house, he'd been quite the looker in his youth. Most of the pictures were of old hunting expeditions, and there was even an old shotgun mounted on the wall behind him. Now, though, he sank so deep into his weathered armchair that it was hard to tell where he ended and where the chair began. The skin of his bare arms looked like uncooked sausage pressed up against the casings. "From your wife?" I asked. Busher nodded slowly.
Yes, from Martha.
"How can you be so sure that this is your wife's ghost?" I asked.
I've seen her. I don't go downstairs anymore. But when I've been down there, I've seen her. Lurking, off to the side, watching from the shadows. I've seen her, and I know I'm not crazy.
I wrote down most of what he'd said, everything I'd need to look into this supposed ghost. Busher's claims were arguably more credible than most. Oftentimes, complaints of ghosts were nothing more than the house settling, or rats in the walls. Simple apophenia, the human mind forming connections where none existed. It was a disturbingly common occurrence. One of the most incredible aspects of the human brain was its ability to trick itself when exposed to the right or wrong stimulus. My name is Sabrina Deep, and you could consider me a ghost hunter. Before you laugh, I make a point to go into my paranormal investigations with the mindset of a skeptic. Most of the times, when you hear stories or rumors about ghosts, it's nothing but simple apophenia. A scared human brain reacting to otherwise mundane phenomena. That said, there are exceptions to that rule. You see, very rarely I'll get word about a haunting that I can't seem to explain. They're almost always very private instances with only a handful of witnesses. It's not just noises or cold gusts of wind or, God forbid, orbs. Whoever decided those were an element of spiritual activity was definitely a fraud. These cases tend to involve actual sightings and close encounters. Of these types of hauntings, I'd say that 9 out of 10 are hoaxes. There's always that one, though. One that is absolutely genuine. And from everything that Zachary Busher had told me, I was sure that this was one of those genuine cases. "How long ago did your wife pass away, Mr. Busher?" I asked.
A while. 30, 40 years, he murmured. She's been lurking around me ever since she died. I tried to move once. I tried to sell the house. No one would buy it. And I can't afford to just leave it.
"How did she die, exactly?" I asked. There was a pause, as if Busher was struggling to remember.
I'm not so sure. She was on a walk. Went out one day to go to the store. She never came back. I had a friend in the police, Michael. He was a good man. He really looked for her. Never found her, though.
I nodded as I wrote that down as well. "I see. Have you ever tried to communicate with her?"
No,
Busher said.
No point. She doesn't talk. Just moans. I never see her face.
"All right. You say she's been haunting you since she died, right? How long after her disappearance would you say she started appearing?" Another pause as Busher struggled to remember.
"Weeks,"
he finally said.
"It was a few weeks when I first saw her out of the corner of my eye. thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, but no, it was her. The more I saw her, I started to realize that it was her.
So, why contact me now?
Because I can't sleep. It's worse than it ever was before. She's walking and moaning every night. I want her gone. I want this finished so I can spend my last few years in peace.
His tone was sharp, and I was almost afraid he was about to have a heart attack. Still, I held my ground and just nodded as I wrote down my final notes. I understand. I'll let you know if I have any further questions, Mr. Busher. With that, I stood up. He watched me with his beady eyes as I did.
Are you going down there?
He asked. Yeah, just to do a few quick readings. Maybe run a few tests. He didn't reply to that. He just slumped back into his chair. One massive, clumsy hand fumbled with the remote.
I'll be here,
he said as the TV went on. I left him in his living room as I went to find my way to the basement. I took out a sensor from my pocket and checked it again. The electromagnetic readings from the house were consistent with other instances of real paranormal activity I'd encountered. Unless there was some outside factor causing them to spike, I was sure that some sort of entity existed in the basement. As I opened the door and began my downwards descent, my readings slowly began to climb. In my experience, there are two different kinds of ghosts. Those trapped in a loop that endlessly repeats some aspect of their life, briefly manifesting as they do. These ghosts cannot be stopped, but I've only encountered a single instance where one was harmful. The second kind of ghost was more dangerous and less predictable. It was a sentient spirit of someone deceased, but its state of undeath had twisted it into something driven purely by emotion, usually rage or grief. Rage made for the most dangerous spirits. I don't suppose I need to explain how dark and twisted an emotion rage is, nor do I need to explain what it does to the human soul when it is left to fester in such an overwhelming emotion after the trauma of death. These kinds of ghosts were lonesome, wretched things, struggling to manifest and interact with the world they were bound to, in some desperate attempt to find even an ounce of solace so they could pass into whatever exists beyond the veil. However, since they existed with purpose, they could also be disposed of. Those kinds of ghosts were always kept around by something. Some called it unfinished business, but others were simply bound to something or someone. There were countless methods of getting rid of them, depending on why they'd stayed. If they were bound, then whatever they were bound to needed to be destroyed. If they had something to finish, then finishing it would allow them to find the peace they sought. From what Busher had said, I had reasons to suspect both kinds of ghost. All I needed to do now was see for myself. Busher's basement was just as much of a disaster as the rest of his house. It was unfinished and filled with the clutter that one built up over a lifetime. Most prominent were the taxidermied animal heads, more than I could count. Old trophies of Busher's youth. I studied them in silence for a few moments, a quiet discomfort irking at me before I wandered deeper into the basement. I checked my sensor again. Electromagnetic readings were still high. I wasn't alone down there. I couldn't see anything, but I knew that I was being watched. I'd encountered ghosts who were afraid before. They were always born of grief or rage, and feared the living world because they didn't know how to interact with it. Yet this ghost had no fear. Even though I could not see her, I could feel the fury radiating off of her like cold air. She was watching me, studying me from the shadows, and I knew it. In fact, I'd rarely ever encountered anything like this at all. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a figure, shambling out of the shadows and out of my field of vision. I knew better than to look. If I looked, she'd be gone. From what I could see, though, I spotted a white sweater stained with a rusty brown. The footsteps echoed behind me, and I remained still, listening and studying as the spirit of Martha Busher examined me. Then, I heard it. A voice. It didn't speak any coherent words. All it did was rasp weakly. A rattling inhale that barely even sounded human. I closed my eyes, sensing the presence all around me. The footsteps circled me, keeping their distance. The rasping breathing was erratic and forced. Not excited. Angry. The footsteps stopped in front of me. The breathing continued, indicating Martha's presence. Speaking to her seemed a waste of time, and as I opened my eyes, I saw no one there with me. Not in front of me, at least. But from the corner of my eye, I saw a humanoid shape in the darkness. Martha. Her blood-stained white sweater was falling apart. What skin she had left was pale and moldy. Yet her face was the most disturbing feature of all. There wasn't one. I'd seen plenty of horrible things in my time. Ghosts are not exactly pretty. But the sight of what was left of Martha's head turned my stomach. Shards of jagged bone and teeth jutted out of a pulpy mess of rotten, ragged flesh. She had no eyes, and rotten brain leaked out of a hole in the center of her face. Her lower jaw hung down almost comically, and I could see a clear crack running along her forehead where her skull had been split in two. Even without eyes, I knew she was staring at me, and I held in my desire to recoil or cry out. Martha wheezed, her lower jaw twitching as she did, and I made myself stare at her. Slowly, her arm began to rise. She pointed at something in one corner of the cluttered room, and my eyes followed her emaciated, rotten finger to a small trunk in one corner of the unfinished basement. Slowly, I made my way towards the trunk. I took my eyes off of Martha for only a moment, but it was enough for her to disappear. Still, I felt her presence. Part of me had some idea of what I'd find in there, and I'd already decided what I was going to do with it. Busher had hired me to get rid of his ghost problem, and I had no intention of doing anything but my job. Martha had simply told me how to help her move on. As I opened the trunk, I stared down at its contents and exhaled through my nose. Like I said, I'd already had some idea of what I'd find in the chest, so I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, I suppose, but not surprised. Behind me, I could hear Martha wheezing. Her sweet, rotten breath was cold on the back of my neck, and I knew that it was time to get to work. I reached into the chest, and I did exactly that. "Did you see her?" Busher called from the living room as I ascended the stairs of his basement. "I did," I replied, "and I think I've figured out your little problem." The old man sighed in relief. I suppose that was the best news he'd gotten in 40 years. "Thank God. I was almost afraid I'd never be rid of her." "Give me a few minutes. I can fix that," I said as I closed the basement door behind me. I looked over towards the living room before walking inside it to show Busher what I'd found.
So, what exactly do you need to do?
He asked, and his voice trailed off as I stepped into the living room with him, carrying part of what I'd found in the trunk. He stared at the rotting bone fragments in my hand that had once been a human skull, and his eyes darted from them back to me. I assume you did all these taxidermies yourself? I said coldly. My eyes darted up towards the old shotgun on the wall. Busher didn't say a word. His mouth hung slackly open as he tried to think of some excuse, some lie or justification he could feed me, even though I really couldn't be bothered. No need. I'm not all that surprised. I had a few suspicions when he first called me, which, I might add, was a huge mistake. You know, there's an old saying, dead men tell no tales. That's a lie. But I'm not here to judge, Mr. Busher. I'm here to do a job. His expression softened into one of quiet relief before I casually tossed the fragments of his late wife's skull into his lap. It's a simple fix. Once Martha has concluded her business, she will no longer manifest in this world, and she'll be free to move on. Busher just looked at the broken skull fragments in his lap, eyes widening as he realized just what I meant. From behind me, I could hear Martha's raspy breathing and her slow, methodical footsteps.
Wait! Don't do this! I could pay you! What do you want?
He stammered, but I was already on my way out the door. There was no need for me to witness what was about to happen. I'm sure I'll be able to collect what I'm owed from your estate after the funeral, I said, and took only a quick glance back at Zachary Busher before I left. He sat in his chair, unable to move and staring wide-eyed at something I couldn't see. Something I was not meant to see. Goodbye, Mr. Busher. It was nice doing business with you. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow, and see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.